Ramesh walked through the crowded marketplace, his polished shoes clicking against the uneven ground. The air was filled with the smell of spices, roasted corn, and fresh fruits. Vendors called out to passing customers, trying to sell their goods. Children weaved through the crowd, laughing as they carried baskets for their parents. Amid the chaos, a poor fruit seller stood near his small wooden cart, his clothes worn and faded, sweat dripping down his forehead as he arranged a pile of bright red apples. Seeing Ramesh approach, the man's eyes lit up with hope. Perhaps if this wealthy businessman bought something, it would make the day better. With a polite smile, he picked up the freshest apple and said softly, "Sir, would you like to buy some? They're sweet and fresh. Just a little will help me feed my children tonight." But Ramesh barely even glanced at the apples. He stopped, tilted his head slightly, and frowned as if insulted. His voice was sharp, cutting through the noise of the market. "Do you really think I eat such cheap fruits? Look at me. Do I look like someone who would touch this? Move your cart out of my way." The fruit seller's smile faded instantly, and his shoulders drooped. He quietly placed the apple back on the pile, saying nothing more. Around them, a few people paused, watching the scene. Some shook their heads, whispering to each other about Ramesh's arrogance. But Ramesh didn't notice or care. With a proud look on his face, he straightened his jacket and walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than the noise of the entire marketplace. Later that week, Ramesh arrived at a grand party hosted in one of the city's most luxurious hotels. The entrance sparkled with golden lights, and guests stepped out of expensive cars dressed in fine suits and gowns. Ramesh walked in confidently, his head high, his watch shining under the chandelier light. Everywhere he went, people greeted him with polite smiles, though some whispered quietly about his arrogance behind his back. The dining hall was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the aroma of rich food. Ramesh sat at a long table, surrounded by other wealthy men and women. He ordered the finest dishes, plates of delicacies stacked high in front of him. As he ate, he boasted loudly about his success, speaking of the profits his company made and how others could never match his lifestyle. Many listened politely, though their eyes revealed a hidden annoyance. Finally, when the evening drew to a close, the waiter arrived with the bill. Ramesh pulled out his shiny credit card with a smirk, as though paying would prove his wealth once again. The waiter swiped it, but the machine beeped and flashed red. Ramesh frowned. "Try again," he said sharply. The waiter did, but once more, the card was declined. A small murmur rose among the guests at the nearby tables. Ramesh pulled out another card, then another. Each time, the machine rejected it. His confident face began to tighten with unease. The waiter cleared his throat, his voice low but firm. "Sir, all your cards are being declined." The room grew quieter. People leaned closer, whispering. Some smiled behind their hands, enjoying the sight of the proud businessman struggling. Ramesh's face turned red with embarrassment. For the first time, his arrogance cracked. He searched his pockets desperately, only to realize he had left his wallet at home. He stood up, walking quickly toward the door, his heart pounding. Outside, the cool night air hit his face, but instead of calming him, it made him feel smaller, weaker. He looked around, hoping someone might help him, but the faces that passed by were cold, remembering how he had treated others before. Alone, humiliated, Ramesh leaned against the wall, his pride crumbling in silence. As Ramesh stood outside the hotel, sweating under the night sky despite the cool breeze, his mind raced in panic. The once confident businessman now looked lost, his tie loosened, his eyes darting nervously at the passing cars. People he had considered his friends from the party walked past him without stopping. A few even smirked, whispering behind his back, enjoying the downfall of a man who had always spoken with arrogance. Just then, a familiar voice broke through his despair. "Sir, are you all right?" Ramesh turned sharply. To his surprise, it was the fruit seller from the marketplace, the same man he had insulted days ago. He was carrying a basket half filled with apples, his clothes just as worn, but his eyes were calm and kind. Ramesh blinked, too shocked to speak. Shame rushed over him as he remembered how harshly he had dismissed this man. He lowered his gaze, unable to meet the fruit seller's eyes. I forgot my wallet," he muttered, his voice trembling. "They all laughed at me inside. I don't know what to do." The fruit seller studied him quietly for a moment. Then, without hesitation, he reached into his small pouch and pulled out a few crumpled notes, his entire earnings for the day. Holding them out, he said softly, "Take this, sir. It's not much, but it will cover your bill." No one deserves to be humiliated. Ramesh's eyes widened. The man he had mocked, the man he considered beneath him, was now offering help without a trace of bitterness. His throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt truly humbled. He slowly extended his hand, accepting the money, though his fingers trembled as they touched the rough, calloused hands of the fruit seller. The crowd at the entrance, curious about the scene, watched silently. Some shook their heads in amazement. Others whispered, "That's the same fruit seller he insulted last week." But the fruit seller didn't seem to care about what anyone thought. His only concern was helping a fellow human being in need. In that moment, Ramesh felt something break inside him, not his pride, but his arrogance. His heart, once hardened by wealth and ego, softened under the weight of unexpected kindness. The next morning, Ramesh woke up earlier than usual. Sleep had barely touched his eyes. Instead, the image of the fruit seller's outstretched hand and humble face replayed in his mind again and again. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the city skyline outside his tall glass window, but for the first time, those high-rise buildings and bright lights felt meaningless. He whispered to himself, "All my wealth, all my power, and yet, in my darkest moment, it was the poorest man I had insulted who saved me." His voice cracked as he realized how blind pride had made him. Later that day, he drove to the marketplace. The usual chaos of vendors shouting prices and children running around greeted him, but Ramesh's eyes searched for only one person. Finally, at the corner, he spotted the fruit seller arranging apples on his cart, his hands moving with the same calm patience as always. Ramesh approached quietly, and the fruit seller looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. Before the man could speak, Ramesh folded his hands respectfully and said, "I came to thank you. You taught me more about life in one night than I have learned in all my years of business." The fruit seller smiled gently, shaking his head. "Sir, I only did what any human should do. Kindness costs nothing, but it can change everything." Ramesh's throat tightened. He reached into his pocket and handed the man an envelope. "This isn't charity," he explained softly. "It's an opportunity. Inside are papers to open your own fruit shop, a proper one with walls, shelves, and space to grow. Consider it an investment in someone whose heart is richer than any billionaire's wallet." The fruit seller froze, his hands trembling as he accepted the envelope. His eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. The crowd around them, noticing the scene, murmured in awe. Ramesh placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave me dignity when I had none. Today, I give you what I should have given long ago, respect." From that day forward, Ramesh changed. He still wore his fine suits, but his words softened. He listened more, judged less, and treated people not by their wealth but by their character. And every time he passed the little fruit shop that now thrived at the corner of the market, he smiled, remembering the night his pride was shattered, and his soul was saved. Because in the end, life had taught him the purest truth: wealth may fill pockets, but kindness fills the heart forever.